Your body has a survival system so old, so deeply wired, that it activates the exact moment something bigger than you decides you are food. And somewhere on this planet, 500,000 years ago, that system was tested more times than any human alive today could imagine. Here's the question we're actually answering in the next few minutes. What does it physically feel like to be eaten alive? Not the sanitized version, the real one, second by second, sense by sense. And how do we know this happened to our own ancestors long before anyone could write it down? The answer is sitting in a drawer in South Africa, inside a small fossilized skull that changed the way scientists understand our entire species. In 1924, workers pulled that skull out of a quarry. It belonged to a child, about 3 years old, from an ancient ancestor species called Australopithecus africanus. For decades, everyone assumed the damage on the skull came from violence, one early human killing another. A simple story. Until researcher Lee Berger looked closer, decades later, at the strange puncture marks near the eye sockets. They weren't from a rock. They weren't from a weapon. They matched, almost exactly, the talons of a giant bird of prey, a species still alive today, still capable of snatching a small primate clean off the ground. This child hadn't been murdered. It had been hunted from the sky. That fossil is now called the Taung Child, and it's one of the earliest proofs we have of something deeply uncomfortable. For a huge stretch of prehistory, our ancestors weren't always the hunters. They were prey. So, let's go there. Let's actually sit inside that experience because it's more disturbing than most people expect. Picture an early hominin at dusk, alone near a waterhole 500,000 years ago. A shape moves in the tall grass. There's no time to process it as a threat before the body has already reacted. Because the instant a predator strikes, adrenaline floods the bloodstream in a wave so massive that survivors of real predator attacks, documented by modern researchers, describe time itself seeming to slow down and sound narrowing to almost nothing. This isn't calm. It's the nervous system sacrificing everything else, thought, memory, awareness, just to keep the muscles fighting for one more second. Now the jaws close. And here's the detail almost nobody talks about. Big cats don't usually kill with a single decisive blow. They kill through suffocation, clamping down on the throat and holding, cutting off blood and oxygen to the brain. Wildlife biologists who've documented real predator kills describe this process taking several minutes where the victim can still be conscious, still aware, still in some primal corner of the mind, registering exactly what is happening, even while the adrenaline numbs the physical sensation of teeth breaking skin. Then comes the part almost no document from that era could ever record, but the fossil evidence does. Researcher C.K. Brain, one of the founders of a field called taphonomy, essentially forensic science for ancient bones, spent years studying hominin remains found deep inside cave systems in southern Africa. What he found inside those caves was chilling, puncture marks on hominin bones that matched, almost tooth for tooth, the bite spacing of an extinct saber-toothed cat. These caves weren't shelters. In many cases, they were dens, and the early humans inside them weren't residents. They were meals, dragged in and eaten in private, the same way a leopard today hauls a carcass up into a tree, away from scavengers, to feed alone. Which means somewhere, in the darkness of a cave exactly like that, an early human's final moments played out exactly like this, consciousness fading in and out as blood loss set in, the sound of their own heartbeat roaring in their ears, growing slower, more distant, and then silence, while somewhere just beyond the cave mouth, life for everyone else continued completely unaware. Now here's the twist that flips this entire story upside down. This constant, grinding fear of being hunted may not have just been something our ancestors endured. It may have built us. Anthropologists call it the predation hypothesis, the theory that being hunted so relentlessly for hundreds of thousands of years forced early hominins toward the exact traits that eventually created humanity. Group living wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was a survival algorithm. More eyes meant more warning before an attack. Communication wasn't born for poetry or trade. Some researchers argue it was born from the need to scream a warning fast enough to save the person next to you. Even fire, found in caves alongside these same predator-marked bones, may have first mattered not for warmth or cooking, but because a flickering flame at the mouth of a cave was one of the only things standing between a sleeping human and something with teeth built to end them. Which means every trait we consider distinctly, proudly human, language, tight social bonds, the mastery of fire, may trace back to millions of nights spent being hunted like prey. Terror didn't just happen to our ancestors. It appears to have written the blueprint for civilization itself. And this is where the story stops being about the past and starts being about you. Right now, inside your own body, is a nervous system engineered by that exact terror. That jolt of fear when you hear a noise behind you in the dark before your conscious mind even understands why. That's not irrational. That's inherited hardware, built over hundreds of thousands of years by ancestors who spent far longer being hunted than they ever spent hunting. That eagle, gripping a small skull in its talons on an ancient African plain, had no idea what it was holding. It had no way of knowing that the species it had just fed on would one day build cities, write history, and dig up its own bones to understand where it came from. Being eaten alive was never just an ending for our ancestors. It may have been the beginning of everything we are.